Well, I feel like you were just like suited so primely for the music business. You know, not just your dad. Like your dad is multifaceted already. He's an incredible songwriter, incredible producer, has an incredible eye for talent. Then your sister's one of the best singers that's ever come along. You were so just immersed in this to be something spectacular, but at the same time you're your own person. So I would love to hear like what are the pros and cons that you've learned from being around those things, because there has to be drawbacks to that too, right?
Yeah, for one, um, Dad's harder on my songs than he is on anybody else's. I've had one Kenny Chesney cut, and it's a bonus track, and I wrote it with Dad and Casey Beathard,
Mm-hmm.
and we wrote it for Kenny, and the only reason Kenny heard it is because he was at the Sony Music, and Troy Tomlinson said, "Did you hear that song Marlon Buddy wrote for you?" And Casey, and he was like, "No, what are you talking about?" So Troy gave it to him. So that's a drawback for me. Um, but uh, I had the opportunity to know people. I never had to ask Daddy to open a door for me because I already knew the people
Right,
that were in the business. I was already around them, so all I had to do was ask,
right.
and I got an opportunity. Now the reason I kept getting to go back is because the one thing in my whole life I've never been unsure about is my ability to sit down and write a song.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been afraid of writing words down, and so I think that I'm not confident. I get very nervous when I sing, and but when I walk in a room to write a song, I'm never worried. I'm not worried about who I'm walking in to write a song with.
That's incredible because I mean, you've co-written with your dad. You've co-written with a. I mean, shoot.
He's the only one that made me nervous.
Yeah, I can imagine. But we also you got cuts with Dean Dillon and Scotty Emmerich on the same song, by the way, with those two guys. And
I
um,
just saw Scott night before last. We were at dinner, and all of a sudden he walked in.
yeah, just man, it's and for you to just walk into a room with folks like that and feel like you belong, that's got to be a huge thing for you. And just that way you can just get right to work, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's just I I just I never doubted my words. I haven't ever doubted the ability to use my words, and I think that confidence helps me a lot in that because I do doubt my melody sense, and I doubt my singing. Melanie's always been the singer, so um,
I
when
disagree.
I started singing out, I was it made me sick at my stomach.
Well, I think you're a fabulous singer. I love your record,
Thank you very much.
My Reflection, and I want to get into that later. It's one of my favorite records I've ever heard come from Nashville. I'll be
Oh, thank
honest.
you so
It's
much.
so good, and not just because your hits are on there, but your voice is better than you give it credit for, I think, first of all. But I want to get into something, too, because you just mentioned it, that you believe in your words. You trust your words. But you don't trust your musical sense. And I know that you do have a working relationship with guitar. You yourself have self admitted that you're not a guitar player, but how does that affect your songwriting? Just not being having a musical base to fall back on.
Um, well, I play clarinet, so yeah, I am very musical. I can read music. I can sit down at the piano in
Right.
there and pull out a songbook and play something on the piano. I just don't. There's something I'm missing a piece of confidence. I know all my chords on the guitar. To sit down and try to piece them together, I chicken out, and I'm working on that right now. I'm learning to play my songs.
Good.
I was really doing really good, and I cut the pad of my thumb off about 3 months ago, and I've had to wait for it to heal up to get back to playing. But I've got a goal. I want to be able to just sit down and play five of my songs without wanting to puke.
This probably wouldn't.
I've
It
actually,
probably wouldn't be a good look, Marla.
I've played twice. I've played two songs out at the Bluebird both times, and actually played for myself when I. No, one time was at Douglas Corner, but I played it, and but the whole time I felt like I was going to be sick.
Marla Cannon-Goodman live featuring projectile vomiting.
New
Oh man,
talent.
yeah. Oh gosh, that'd be a good rock band name. Projectile vomiting.
Projectile vomit.
Yeah. So obviously, coupling yourself with really good musicians is important in your craft as well. When you're, I know that you probably still have a publishing deal and have had one for a long time. Is that part of your strategy in lining up co-writing sessions? Is really trying to ferret out who you think musically is going to align the best with you?
Um, yes, I write for Carnival, and I write for Frank Liddell, and
Hmm.
actually, he's the person that got the full cut
Okay.
on Leanne, who just happens to be his wife now. At
Of course, it's all
at the
circular, isn't
time,
it?
oh, you have no idea. When um when I wrote the full, a friend of mine, Gina Dillon, um, she used it on her project. She was shopping around trying to get a record deal, and Hazel Smith. I don't know if you remember Hazel Smith. She had the cooking show, but she's
Yes.
actually the one that coined the term outlaw country.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think she might have, she was all about the highwayman.
Hmm.
And she took Gina into Frank Liddell's office. He was at Decca Records, and he loved Gina singing, but they had just signed a new artist, which happened to be Leanne Womack. And the Fool was actually on Gina's um, comp that she took in.
Okay.
And he told him, then he sent him over to Universal because he said, we can't sign you. We just signed somebody else, but he opened a couple of doors for other places. So fast forward 4 or 5 months, and he's looking for songs for the new artist they had just signed. I had just signed a publishing deal at Major Bob Music, and that was another whole crazy story. I have to interject this. I was working as a nurse, and Lana Thrasher, at the time she was Lana Wood, but she later married Neil Thrasher.
Hmm.
She was running Major Bob Music, and she called me out of the blue. And of course, I knew her because I was always around all the guitar pulls and stuff. And um, she said, what are you doing right now? And I said, I'm about to go to work. And she said, well, what are you doing as work? And I said, I'm working as a nurse. And she said, are you doing anything at all in music? And I said, well, I've been writing some songs. She said, I want to hear everything you got. She said, I dreamed last night we were on stage at ASCAP.
Oh my gosh.
And so I went in and met with her and took in a Schedule A of songs, and the Fool was on my Schedule A. And they signed me immediately to a
Mm.
publishing deal. And so fast forward back to Frank is out looking for songs for Leanne Womack, and he said that it's a new artist. None of the major labels or major publishers were wanting to give up any of their new songs for a new artist. And he said so. We started reaching out to some of the smaller companies, and he's reached out to Major Bob, and Shannon Myers, our song plugger at the time, went over to play him songs. And Frank said he handed him the tape. He said I turned around and I put it in my player, and he said that the first line started, it said, you don't know me, but I know who you are. He said, I stopped the recorder. I turned around and I looked at Shannon and I pointed at him and said, I'm the fool in love with the fool who's still in love with you. And said, Shannon was like, how do you know that? He goes, put that song on hold right now. It's a hit.
Hmm.
And so he took it in and to Leanne, and actually she hated his guts at the time. She thought he was lazy and worth nothing. It's the funniest story to hear all of us in the same room at the same time. It's quite comical to hear how it all went down in everybody's eyes. But he said that one of the people in their strategy meeting told her, said, if you cut this song, I'll make it your first number one. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So,
And it wasn't the first single. The first single was Never Again Again, which I will never
yes.
forget. Leah Womack just comes out of the chute with those two songs as a brand new artist. And I mean, she just made her entire career just off those two songs, I feel. I mean, they were just incredible songs for a brand new artist.
Yeah,
Um,
and she said the reason she was balking at cutting the Fool, not only did she not like Frank, but the song was unconventional for her. She was used to, verse,
right.
chorus, three chords and the truth, and it wasn't that.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was a lot of songs around back then, too, that kind of broke the mold with structure. Like,
Right.
like there was always And it's funny, you're leading me into my next note on my outline, which is perfect. But like that structure does, like the dance, for example. There's no bridge in the dance. It's one of the biggest songs in the history of music.
Yeah.
And so when Tony Arata writes the dance, he's basically saying you don't need this structure to be successful. And so then I think that gave a lot of you other songwriters the freedom to explore that lack of structure and try to make that more mainstream, I feel. Do you feel like I think it's interesting that like music, especially songwriting, is one of the only things in the world where you find success in it and you can't just do the same thing you did to get more success, right? Like if, for example, just something basic, sweeping the floor. If you do a good
Right.
job, you just do the same thing the second time and you have it. You can't do that with music. So because you can't
Well,
write
you
the
know,
same
if you
song over and over again, you know?
well, some people do,
Oh
and they're
yeah, of
having
course,
success
yeah.
they're having success doing it. But I can tell you this: I I am so thankful and grateful that this is what I do for a living, and it is a very sacred thing to me. And I try my best to not write the same song ever.
Hmm.
And I want every one of them to be unique and to have a life of their own. And it's I just I try my best to not let them sound the same.
But that's going to be a difficult thing, especially as a published songwriter, where you kind of do have a little bit of a you know pressure hanging over your head to write a song for somebody or whatever. That's going to be tough trying to find success in different ways. You know.
I have the best publisher in the whole world. I feel no pressure at all. Um,
Well,
I
that's lucky.
yeah, and you know, a while ago you were talking about marrying a poet and a lyricist together, and this is the perfect example of the freedom that I have working in my publishing company. I was writing one day with Brandy Clark and Haley Witters, and we had already written a song that day, and we were sitting and talking, and especially about what's been happening in the world just the last 2 days.
Mm.
Um, we were sitting talking, and you have three very different opinions in the room. You have Haley, who is very, very liberal. You have Brandy, who is she's she's probably the fence rider of the bunch. She is a gay woman,
Hmm.
but she's very old school,
Right.
and not that she's not. She's liberal and she's conservative. She's very, very middle of the road.
Hmm.
And for me, I'm a pretty conservative girl. I grew up in a Baptist background, and I just have different beliefs and different things. But at the same time, we were all very common threaded
Hmm.
together,
Right.
and because I would say that we were probably all sitting on the fence. We're just all sitting in different directions, if
Hmm.
that makes sense.
It does.
So we're sitting in the room this day, and we're talking. I had this idea for a song, and when I'm talking to them, and I was like, y'all, I have this idea, and I said, I just feel like the idea is called Same Devil, and I said, and I just feel like that we are all chasing after one thing, and we're all running from the same devil.
Hmm.
And I said, we sat there and we talked out the lyric to this song, and every line we just sat there and went back and forth because the opening line is, there's a guy selling baggies by a telephone pole to a dime bag girl who's going to sell her soul on the corner, around the corner from where her mama sits, waiting on a call she hopes she never gets.
Mm.
And it's we were talking to every person in this whole country at that point. It's like, it could be anybody at any time. And we wrote it without any music.
Hmm.
We just sat there and talked the whole song out. So we wrote it like a poem. And then after the fact, we put it to music. And so Brandy actually did a work tape on it, very minimal work tape on it. And I cut it on I've got another record that's out called Perfect Imperfections that I wrote, that I did it all with Josh Martin.
Hmm.
And so Josh and I got that, the just stripped down guitar tape with Brandy, and me and Josh took it in and we added a little difference to it. We did some different things, and I did some weird eerie oohs on it. Well, then I sent it to Brandy, and when COVID happened, Brandy's sitting in her house, and Carlisle calls her, and is like, they start talking, and they decide to do a record in the middle of COVID. And so I had sent Brandy my version of Same Devil. So then they take it in and they amp it up a little more and turn it into the song that they put out on Americana. And it was up for Vocal American Roots Performance of the Year for a
Nice.
Grammy.
Yeah. Nice.
And it was like written as a poem.
Yep.
We sat there and wrote it as a poem, turned it into a song, and it ended up for a Grammy.
Well, it's funny you talk about having differences in the room. I don't remember who it was that said it to me. It was very recent though, but a songwriter told me that the song always rules the room.
It should.
Yeah.
It don't always, but
Yeah.
absolutely 100% should.
And the way he put it was, if the song rules the room like it should, then everybody's differences within the room don't matter, because
don't matter at all.
You're all going to the same place. And so that's why I love doing this show, because these stories are so cool, and I don't feel like they're out there enough. You know what I mean? So
yeah,